welcome back to the Boropolis podcast. As usual, I am joined with Nathan, and yet again, Nathan, we've got another win to talk about.
Yeah, it's really enjoyable to come on here and talk about wins. And it's been quite a long time as well with that international break. It felt like the longest 2 weeks ever, having to wait after Sunderland and the demolition derby to come on here and talk about Boro again. But yeah, we're back and another win. It's really nice to have that to look forward to following Saturday 5 p.m. Coming and 3 points on the board once again. Looking at the league table, it's looking a lot nicer than it was a few weeks ago. And yeah, you just want the games to keep rolling in and the podcast to keep rolling in as well.
Yeah, you do. And do you know what, Nathan? After Sunderland were on such a high, I was slightly alarmed that, all that momentum that we'd built up, it might sort of, the national break might have come at the wrong time. But I think given yesterday's performance, it quite clearly hasn't really. And the momentum's continued. So, yeah, look, we might as well get straight into it, to be honest. We don't have a Rudd's Arms update for you this week because the game was called off, obviously, because of the weather. Nathan, we'll talk about the big cup game next week if that goes ahead. But I think we can quickly go into the game this week, can't we?
Yeah, jump straight into the Borough. Firstly, new PA system at the Riverside, Chris. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, do you know what? It was too loud yesterday. I'm not going to lie. I couldn't hear myself think before the game started. I know you got in with really minutes to spare before the game kicked off, but I was there a good probably 40 minutes beforehand. And I mean, it sort of changed volumes throughout the build up to the game. I think they were just trying to figure out like sort of which speakers were where and how loud it should be in certain parts of the ground. And I mean, I think with about 10 minutes to kick off, I actually tried to turn and have a conversation with my dad, and he literally just went, "I can't hear you." So yeah, nice that they've installed it, but I think it could do with a little bit of tuning, to be honest, Nathan.
Yeah, as I was walking to the ground from the Six Meadows, you could literally hear everything that was going on. So it was quite alarming to hear that. But yeah, going the game unchanged from Sunderland. Nice to see a few returning injured players to the bench. Rav Vandenberg, one of those, but one notable absentee, Daryl Enahan. The last I heard, he was injured. Sorry, he was out with illness, I think, in the week leading up to Sunderland with the Cardiff game, and then of course Sunderland. So yeah, Chris, any updates on Daryl Enahan?
I think people are expecting me to give a bit of sort of like in the know information, yeah, when in fact the only information I can give you, Nathan, is that I was on a flight back from Dublin with them last Sunday. So yeah, unless he's really gone to town on the Guinness whilst he's had a little trip during the international break and he still hasn't recovered, then yeah, I don't know what it is. He didn't look too worse for wear on the plane. He looked in good health, so I can only assume that he's picked up a knock in training, which is obviously a bit of a blow. But with Paddy McNair's form at the moment, I don't think had he have even been available, he probably would have got back in the team, as you say, unchanged and rightfully so. I don't think after that result, anyone could have been dropped unless they were injured. So, yeah, happy with the team, to be honest. And going into the game, a large part of my thoughts was really, I don't really know how Birmingham are going to play because they've changed manager. I don't think it had been confirmed when we recorded the last podcast, but we hinted to it that the news was sort of just starting to leak out a little bit from Birmingham. And yeah, it was sort of going up against an unknown quantity yesterday because we know the players that Birmingham have, but the system, it was probably always going to be a little bit different because ROONEY was going to come in and probably want to try and prove a bit of a point and, stamp his authority a little bit. And in the end, I think that's probably what's lost Birmingham the game, to be honest.
Yeah, I'd be inclined to agree with you, Chris. Looking at their personnel in the side, and sort of knowing what those players are about, having watched them in the Championship over the years, and also hearing uh, and reading Birmingham's statement on sacking John Eustace and then appointing Wayne Rooney as manager, um, trying to establish no fear football uh, in a side where you have Kevin Long and Dion Sanderson at centre half. You start three defensive midfielders in your midfield three, and then you start a centre forward wide right and Scott Hogan down the middle. I'm not quite sure that you're going to be able to instill no fear attacking football straight away from the get go with the personnel that they have. Um, Regarding them playing out from the back, it still stands out to me now, um, looking through teams over the years that come to the Riverside and try and play out from the back, having principles of building possession from the back, from the goalkeeper, giving it to centre halves that are hopefully comfortable on the ball. I don't think I've seen a trio less comfortable on the ball than John Ruddy, Dion Sanderson, and Kevin Long yesterday. Really, really shaky on the ball. Didn't look like they knew what to do with it when they had it. Really, there was one instance in the first half. I think it was drama actually on that right hand side for them. Just in the first 10 minutes, tried to pass it back to Sanderson. It went out for a Boro corner. Like really, really poor stuff. And it set the tone for the game. Really, I know it's a Middlesbrough podcast, nothing on Birmingham really, but they were really, really poor yesterday, among comfortably the worst three sides that I've seen in the division so far, based on that performance yesterday. Really, really poor. And I was expecting a lot more of a difficult sort of test in the game. I know the result says 1-0 on it. It looks to point at a tight game. It wasn't a tight game at all, as we're going to get into. They offered pretty much nothing going forward in the game. Can remember one shot on target, which we'll get into. But yeah, really poor from Birmingham yesterday. And yeah, I suppose you can only go there and beat what's put in front of you, I suppose. And Middlesbrough did that.
Yeah, they did, and I agree with everything you've just said. Really, Birmingham. It was quite ironic, really, that you would probably give man of the match from a Birmingham perspective to John Ruddy yesterday, and yet he just looked so uncomfortable every time he had the ball. But I mean, some of the saves that he pulled out were quite ridiculous, to be honest. I think we all know that John Ruddy's never had a reputation of some sort of sweeper keeper playing out from the back in the same build as what are perhaps Senny Dieng or Allison, obviously two goalkeepers playing at a similar level at the moment. But yeah, Birmingham, it surprised me in a certain instance, but it didn't also because, as I said earlier in the podcast, they've had the best start of the season in I don't know how many years, but what feels like a long, long time. Rooney could have almost swallowed his pride a little bit and kind of just said, listen, I'm going to keep things quite similar. Maybe a few little tweaks, but we've been in good form. We've got ourselves six in the table. I don't really need to sort of change a lot, but I think his ego has probably thought, well, a lot of the players probably thought, why have we lost John Eustace? The supporters weren't exactly over the moon with the decision. I need to try and make a big tweak, almost just to say, well, I'm here and this is how we're going to do it. And as I say, it completely backfired, really. Although Birmingham did sort of play into our hands in that aspect, I thought our general play, in terms of a full 90, was probably our best performance of the season. And I know that seems daft because of the Sunderland result, but if you factor in playing against 10 men, it is slightly easier. And I think across the full game, it it was just like watching a Middlesbrough performance of last season when we did go on that run where you just felt it was a matter of time before we would score. And then once we did score, we'd score a couple extra. And to be honest, it sort of didn't really go like that. But just the patterns of play, the amount of possession that we had, the amount of goal scoring opportunities. Obviously, Coburn's couple of chances in the first half are the real big chances, the clear cut ones. But as well as them, I mean, Isaiah Jones puts the ball in the back of the net in the first half. And to be honest, I haven't seen a replay of that, but I think he probably was just off a low. That's me just going off my view of the game rather than seeing a replay of it. And yeah, I was really pleased with the way that we played in the first half. I thought Dan Barlaser and Hayden Hackney absolutely controlled the tempo of the game. Dan Barlaser throughout, actually, I thought possibly his best performance in a Middlesbrough shirt. And yeah, as I say, Birmingham, they had that one chance through Bielik when it gets cut back to the edge of the box. Good save from Dieng. But as a whole, we just looked absolutely dominant. And, you know, we'll obviously talk about it as we go deeper into the game, but you kind of felt going in at 0-0 at half time, it almost felt like a little bit downbeat because we'd created that much that, you know, you sort of leave Birmingham with a chance to come out and change tack second half, which they don't in the end. But the game could have been dead and buried. I mean, me and you spoke about it at half time, didn't we?
Yeah, it really could have been 3 or 4 at half time. You have Coburn having a hat full of chances, really. He has the one that's squared across goal from Jones that he knocks round Ruddy, but he's offside for that one. He has the header from the free kick that possibly a difficult chance there, trying to sort of get your head round it and flick it back goalwards. Difficult chance, but still a chance nonetheless. The biggest one at the half for me is where Crooks wins the ball in midfield within 2 passes, Boro through. Hackney into Greenwood. Greenwood on one touch turns it around the corner for Coburn. His first touch is fantastic, sets him straight in behind. He takes another little touch towards his right hand side that possibly makes the angle a little bit more difficult for him. And he kicks it into the ground. I think this is actually intentional because he sees Sanderson coming across, trying to make a sliding block, and he just drags it wide. And for me, I thought it was nailed on that he was going to score that chance, really. I was saying to you at halftime, I think we probably all say that Coburn is the most natural finisher at the club. And you couldn't ask for a better chance, really. About 10 yards out, if
Yeah.
that. And he's
Sort of
dragged
his
it.
bread and butter, really, isn't it? Or what you'd expect it to be. As you say, I think he just drags it, and it's a great move. And in fairness, I think he does quite well just to sort of get his way through and get his shot off. But I think what's killed him in this instance is, as you say, that little extra touch just sort of makes the angle a little bit wider for him. And then I think he's probably positioned his body where he feels like he's almost got to drag it back across. And in the end, he's just dragged it too far. And it's sort of, you'd probably call it gilt edge, wouldn't you? Because as you say, Josh Coburn, he's a little bit of a talking point, actually. And we can go into it now if you like, or we can sort of go through the game and let's talk about it now, in fact, because he's, you know, there's different narratives that have come out following, obviously, full time, like there is after any game. But Josh Coburn, there seems to be, there's always one, isn't there? In every, it's not just a Middlesbrough thing, but in every team, there always seems to be one sort of boo boy or someone to basically put the blame on when things aren't going as, you know, perfect as what the fans would like to see. And I mean, to be honest, at the moment, we're winning games. We've sort of turned the corner since Josh Coburn has come into the team. And yet now, because he isn't scoring as freely as what perhaps some people would want him to, he seems to be coming under quite a lot of heavy criticism. And for me, I'll absolutely stand up for him and say he does not deserve it at all. Admittedly, yes, he probably should have one or two goals yesterday added to his tally. But I think I made the point, possibly after the Watford game, I want to say, that we struggled so much in the early part of the season because basically the ball was not sticking up front. And that was pretty much consistently turning us around and allowing teams to attack us and run and cross the ball back to the edge of the box or just score a screamer. But in essence, just put more pressure on our defence, and a defence that was struggling at the time. And Josh Coburn coming into the team, yes, you can show me any graphs, any data, all pie charts and things like this. And I know that they can be useful in certain circumstances. But if you watch Middlesbrough with your eyes instead of watching them through percentages, you're able to see the impact that Josh Coburn has on the team. Yes, it's sort of come at a bit of an awkward time because yesterday probably wasn't his best performance. But it's no coincidence that since we've turned this corner that he's been in the team. He holds the ball up well. He gives us a focal point. He allows us to sort of sometimes reset and just, because of his stature, the likes of Sanderson and Long yesterday, two physically strong centre-backs in the Championship, that they're predominantly in a team to head it and kick it. And it just allows Josh Coburn to get himself amongst bodies like that and let people basically run around him and give defenders something to think about rather than picking up runners around him and just basically, I feel a little bit sorry for him at the moment. I really do. There is a sort of, it's not a large percentage of Middlesbrough fans, but I seem to just see quite a lot of criticism on social media that, he, because of the chances yesterday, he got a little bit of criticism, but more in his general playing that Latte Laugh should come into the team. And look, Latte Laugh's looked really bright in the last few substitute appearances. But I think context is a little bit key here in the fact that, Latte Laugh, although, he can only come on and play in the situation that he's put on, but he's coming on in the last few games where we're winning a game. The likelihood is we're probably sitting a little bit deeper, and his pace can basically make defenders shit themselves a little bit. He can chase, he can harry, he can be a nuisance. And it almost benefits the way that Lailaf is as a player. He can harry people, he can stop them pumping long balls into the box. And I just think people sometimes, when things are going well, want to pick at the sort of tiny little points that perhaps don't really need to be picked at. That's just my opinion, and obviously everyone's entitled to their own, but I just feel like the criticism at him at the moment is a little bit uncalled for.
Yeah, it is. And it's coming from them statisticians once again. People that, I suppose, in the nicest way possible, don't really watch football with their eyes. They watch data and graphs and want to pull out league averages, comparing Coburn to Jamie Vardy for runs in behind. Or dearie me, he hasn't got as many. Well, yeah, because he's not that type of player. But it's one of them where people can have their opinions. The one that makes me laugh is the Watford fan on Twitter that constantly just wants to nitpick at Coburn, a kid who's come into the side, a side that was very much struggling when he came into it, and he's played a part in the turnaround of Middlesbrough, a side that are now 5 wins on the spin, 6 in all competitions, but those wins are pretty much null and void because of the other team's circumstances. Southampton came into the game against Middlesbrough having lost 3 in a row. Well, Middlesbrough were winless in 7. league games prior to that. So that completely wipes out that stat that you've just brought out at me. So yeah, it's just funny to read through people's opinions that don't actually watch the team, watch what Coburn brings to the team in terms of his stature, occupying two centre halves at times. As you mentioned there, he's playing up on his own yesterday against Sanderson and Long. And there was an instance in the second half where the ball does get played down the side for him, runs down that side, pins Long, and turns back, earns Boro a good few yards of the pitch, and it allows us to sustain an attack and build going forward. But yeah, apparently the stats say that he's awful at beavering away and pressing as well. So look, well, I don't really know what to say in regard to the stats and the expected tries hard or whatever. So yeah, you can make as many stats as you like. Sometimes they are helpful to form arguments and opinions. And yeah, look, yesterday nothing really would have made me happier than Coburn scoring all three of those chances, and it completely just batters the statisticians' opinions into oblivion, really. But comparing all of Boro's centre forwards in the international break, and you look at Coburn's stats, I suppose, on the graphs that were being used, and they're nowhere near in line with the league averages. And then you look at Latte Laths and the miles above the league averages. But in the first 5 games that I saw a Latte Lath, he couldn't hit a barn door. And then Coburn comes into the side. Okay, doesn't really play a part in terms of goals, but wins a penalty in the Southampton game, hits the post in the Sheffield Wednesday game in his first start of the season. And in those games, I think it's fair to say that he probably offered more in those 2 games than we saw a Latte Lath in the first 7 that we didn't do anything in. And look, of course, you got to factor in context. New player coming to a new country, new league, getting used to a new system, yada yada yada. But statisticians don't factor in context either, so it's one of them really. But yeah, yesterday by and large, it wasn't Coburn's best performance that I've seen him.
It just had to be yesterday, didn't it? When the whole talking point throughout the national break has been Coburn, that he was going to probably have one of his poorer games. But yeah, no, listen, we obviously have the same viewpoint, and it's not us. I think it's important to say, and I think we've kind of covered it anyway, but for those that might be sort of listening and thinking, well, Latif's looked great off the bench. He has looked a real handful. But as I say, coming off the bench when your team's winning is a lot easier. Or, okay, yes, yesterday he comes off the bench when we're drawing and has a good impact. Fair enough again. But fresh legs, Latif, running in behind, making, as I said before, probably not the most technical way of referring to it, but making defenders shit themselves a little bit with his pace. It almost suits Latif as a player. And obviously, look, it wouldn't surprise me if he comes into the team in the next few games. But we've sort of got to judge it off, starts more. At the moment, you've kind of got to judge it off the impact from starts. And Josh Coburn, I certainly don't, let's put it this way, in fact, Nathan, I certainly don't watch us with Josh Coburn in the team and think, I mean, we are absolutely crying out for a striker here. He's, he stands out like a sore thumb. He's awful. He's anything like that. I mean, he's 20 years old. Of course, he's going to have a few ups and downs throughout this season. He wasn't even meant to be involved. He was meant to be having another loan. And from what I've seen of him, I think he's very much made the argument that when January rolls round, yeah, we probably might bring in another striker, but he should certainly be kept round because he's got something to offer this Middlesbrough team without a doubt for me.
Yeah, I'd agree with you. Certainly from what we've seen so far, he definitely has offered enough in games to prove his worth to this Middlesbrough side. And look, like I think that a lot of these people that are pulling out the stats are sort of on the right lines of he probably isn't necessarily ready to be Middlesbrough's number nine. And look, that probably was the same thought process that was going on throughout the summer, trying to bring in centre forwards. And you saw in the last week of the window, Carrick said, "Look, we're keeping him around," and that probably was a mixture between we've seen a little bit of him throughout pre-season to warrant a place in the squad, but also struggles with recruitment. Couldn't bring in the players that we wanted to bring in terms of a centre forward. It didn't happen for us in the market, and we had to stick with what we had. And you've put a lot of faith into Josh Coburn so far, and as far as I'm concerned, he's repaid a lot of that back so far. Of course, you want your striker to be banging in goals every week, and so far this season, he's only got the one. Um, a match clincher, may I add, that wins you the game, gets you 3 points, and in the circumstances, you've only won one game all season. You go away from home, face a bit of adversity in the game, going 2-0 up, and then straight back to 2-2, and he gets played through one-on-one and slots it beyond the keeper, wins you the game. So yeah, I think that there probably will be some movement in January in terms of Middlesbrough trying to bring in another centre forward just to strengthen the squad a little bit more and hopefully push us even further up the table. But that's a long way away yet. You never know. In 2 months' time, Coburn might have scored 10 in that time. And it shuts all the critics up. And Coburn's goal record and expected goal record is way above the league average and makes him look like the second coming of Mbappe, like Latte Lathsgraf does. So you never know. But yeah, wouldn't be surprised to see Middlesbrough going to the market in January for another centre forward.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, look, we usually sort of go on the individual narratives and sort of storylines following full time after the game, but why not? We'll change it up a bit. We'll talk about Josh Coburn. Well, we have talked about Josh Coburn there for quite a considerable amount of time, but it is sort of one of the talking points, I guess, that crept up. These sorts of things usually creep around the international break where everyone kind of gets a little bit bored and then just starts looking at things that are just really and truly probably not as big of a problem as what they actually look like during the international break. But yeah, that's a whole different story. Uh, Going back to the game now, Nathan. Obviously, we spoke about that Josh Coburn chance that he does drag wide. There's a couple of other ones in the first half, but as a whole, you know, we did have these chances. We didn't find that first goal in the first half, but as I mentioned, I was really pleased with the way we played and going into the second half. I was just hoping for more of the same, really.
Yeah, so was I. I think that obviously you just want to build on the first half, get that first goal. And I did feel that if we'd got the first goal early on in the second half, then it'd be a very comfortable afternoon in terms of we'd probably have gone on and scored two or three. But in the end, it was sort of a weird second half where it just sort of continued in the same vein
Yeah.
to the first. It was almost as if halftime wasn't the thing. Um, Middlesbrough just came out, continued to dominate the ball, continued to dominate going forward in terms of chances. Hackney has one where Ruddy tips it wide. I think it was going wide anyway, if I'm honest.
I thought this from our place in the ground, and actually, in fairness to Hackney, I watched a Birmingham fans video, and it is nestling in the corner. But
Yeah.
from our part of the ground, it looks like it's going to go wide, almost like it's got too much whip on it. But it's actually a great save from Ruddy, which was a common theme throughout the second half, really.
Yeah. One thing on John Ruddy, in terms of Middlesbrough's set pieces and corners, I've never seen a keeper look more comfortable in just coming to claim the ball every single time. I don't know
Yeah,
if it was because the deliveries were so poor or if he's just like the number one cross claimer in the division. But it was unbelievable. Every single time we had a corner, he'd just come straight out from his 6 yard box and just pick it out the air as if it was nothing. Um, but yeah, I thought he had a really good game yesterday. In fairness to him, made a lot of good saves. Gets down low, saves Engels, big drive to the edge of the box. It's a good weapon to have that actually. Of
yeah,
course,
one
we,
is going to
we saw
fly
it.
in.
We saw it at Sunderland, and it was nestling at Sunderland, and I think that yesterday's was as well. In fairness, gets down low and makes a good save for that. There was a few corners and set pieces that did make it through Ruddy's grasp, where he was pinned to his line, and Boro won headers that were almost certainly going in. I think Crooks had one. Fry definitely did have one as well. Um, Jones as well in the second half had a shot. Ruddy saved that one that was going in the top corner. It was one of them where as the game was growing on and on and on, I just thought nothing's going to go in today, and it's going to be one of them where you look back after the game and you think that's 2 points drop that just because you couldn't put one chance away. I think we were looking for changes, and I think that Carrick got them right when he made them. Coburn off and Latte Lathon, I thought was a good change because Birmingham didn't look like they were changing the way that they were going to play in terms of they were still open in terms of them
Yeah,
playing out from the back, leaving wide open spaces. And Latte Lath, whilst still on the ball, I think he's too quick to do what he's actually wanting to do with the ball. Um, Looking a bit erratic at times. He's a nuisance and he makes runs in behind, and playing against Sanderson and Long, who were slow at the best of times but had tired legs as well. Thought he could have killed them. So I thought that was a good change. Rogers coming on for Greenwood. Greenwood was quiet yesterday. Didn't have his best game either. But you're going to get that with young players. Thought Jones was fantastic going forward in the second half. Always provides an outlet, always gets at his defenders. Was possibly unlucky not to have a penalty in that first half as well. But yeah, continued to have the beating of Longello time and time again. And interestingly enough, Smith goes down with injury, and it looks quite a sore one in fairness. And I'm looking at what changes are going to be made, and I'm thinking, oh, he's got Dijksteel and Vandenberg on the bench. And instead, he drops Jones into right back and brings Marcus Force on. And I just thought, oh, he sees this game the same way as all the fans see it, where we just need to get 3 points on the board here. These look there for the taking 100%. And it was good to see that actually. And yeah, look, the goal, it comes late in the day, and it was ecstasy, but a big sigh of relief as well that we got the goal, because it probably comes from our worst passage of play in the whole game. The goal does, but some games are just like that where you can have the chance that Coburn has in the first half. It's carved open wonderfully, all on one touch. Hackney into Greenwood. Greenwood flicks it around the corner. Coburn one touch to set himself and bang fire. And that one doesn't go in for you. And you have other chances, set pieces, and all sorts that are just everything's not going in, and then you have the goal, which comes from. I'm going to say it's a really good pass, but I think it is just a punt forward from Howson. I think it is
Yeah,
actually a for latte laugh, but
yeah, I
it's a
think,
punt forward.
yeah, I think I must admit I've watched, and despite half of Twitter seemingly thinking it was Dan Barlaser, despite him not being on the pitch for 13 minutes before the goal, um, yeah, I think Howson does it quite a lot, actually. I don't know if you've noticed, where I'm not sure if there's a stat for this or not, where it'll sort of be like a 60-40, or maybe it's even just a 50-50. And instead of maybe he's just sliding in to win the ball, he basically just absolutely leathers the ball, like almost as if he's trying to have a shot, but as part of the tackle. And I do think he probably sees Latilaf in that area of the pitch. But I mean, the weight of it actually turns out quite perfect, to be honest. I'd like to think that Johnny Howson, and he's got it in his locker for sure, but I'd like to think he's meant it. But on this occasion, I think he's just trying to leather himself into the tackle, and it's worked absolutely perfectly. But yeah, as you say, I mean, it looks wonderful when you watch it back, really.
Yeah, it does. It drops just over Lat's head, right into his path. He gets it under control and drags two defenders over with him. They both win it off him, but we have players breaking in support of Latte Lath. Rogers picks up the loose ball. It's a great first touch, in fairness to him, takes it away from Sanderson, takes him central as well. And I'm thinking, shoot, because he's got possibly one body ahead of him that is sort of occupied by Crooks's movement wide of him. And I'm thinking, just get your shot off. And instead, he squares it to Crooks. And honestly, I thought it was done, and everyone in the ground did. I think. My granddad was behind me, and he'll hopefully forgive me for saying it. But the pass was made, and he said, "You stupid idiot." And but I think by the time he'd said idiot, Crooks has got his long branch and hooked it back across goal. Ruddy's gone down to pick it up, and he has to. In fairness to Ruddy, he's had a top class game, but he has to get low to pick the ball up. And yeah, he's unlucky because Morgan Rogers comes flying in, steaming in across that near post, flicks it beyond him, and wins the game for Middlesbrough. And yeah, look, in terms of the goal, as I said, it's probably the worst goal that I think we'll probably score all season, really, in terms of the
No,
past
no,
play
no.
leading up to
Darragh Lenihan away, Sheffield Wednesdays.
it.
Not that still tops that. I'm not even sure Lenihan even knows where he is when the ball hits off him and goes in. But yeah, it's probably up there, Nathan.
I kind of forgot that that game even happened. It was,
Yeah, I tried to play it as well.
but yeah, Rogers gets the goal, wins us the game, and it was nothing less than we deserved. Really, no one in the ground could have said that Middlesbrough didn't deserve all 3 points, and that's exactly what they got. It's a great little flick by Rogers to get it beyond Ruddy, sneaks it in that near post, wheels away towards that north stand, and yeah, completely deserved. Another 3 points on the board, and
Yeah,
yeah, 5 wins out of 5 in the league.
it's remarkable, really, isn't it? I mean, I come out of the ground yesterday, straight away looked at the league table, 2 points behind Sunderland, 2 points off the playoffs, and just again, I think after every win now at the moment, I just always think back to that Sheffield Wednesday game and just think, how have we got to this situation following that? I mean, it's quite honestly ridiculous. And look, there's been certain tweaks to the system, and there's obviously been changes in personnel, but I I think Carrick, it's obviously still early days in regards to the season, but I think Carrick potentially deserves more credit for the turnaround this season than what he did last season. And yeah, it might be a little bit early to make that statement, but when I think of the level that we were playing at in that Sheffield Wednesday game, and then compare that to, say, one of the games under the start of Chris Wilder last season, it was, I mean, we weren't great under Wilder, definitely not, but my God, we were better than what we have been to start off this season. And yeah, he just deserves so much credit. He obviously pulls out the red jumper yesterday as he realizes on his burner account on Twitter that people have started to take notice as to what he's wearing. So the red jumper has got a 100% win ratio at the moment. That's the only stats that I'll be looking at. But yeah, do you know what? The finish from Rodgers, although it's a little bit scruffy, and obviously the pass, he said himself on BBC Tees after that it's probably the worst pass he's ever played in his career, but he just luckily manages to get on the end of it. It's quite a clever finish, actually, with his left foot, just to sort of use the ball coming back at him to almost just spin it round and just get a little bit of contact. But yeah, as I say, a really, really pleasing victory. Obviously, every victory is pleasing, but I think sometimes those types of wins are arguably, I enjoy them more, the sort of scruffy 1-0ers where, well, I say scruffy 1-0ers, we should have probably won about 6-0, but just squeezing, and finally getting that goal is, yeah, sometimes that's better than just battering the team 3-0 or 4. And if you didn't realise, we scored 4 in our last league game. I can't remember who it was against, though.
Yeah, they are sometimes enjoyable, them 1-0s. But looking at the chances that we had yesterday, and also the game being against Wayne Rooney and the whole sort of national press being at the Riverside yesterday to give Rooney his fairy tale start as Birmingham manager, it'd have been quite good to stuff them 5. But yeah, we'll take 1 and a 90th minute winner as well. That'll be pretty decent in terms of setting the mood. But yeah, it looking at the table and sort of it's always funny to look at early on in the season. Obviously, you look at last season and there was Boro and Coventry at the bottom of the table after the first sort of 10 games, and they both finished 4th and 5th in the playoffs. And then you look at it this season and you see Boro 7 games in, 2 points, bottom of the league, like 24th, bottom of the league. Really, really bad. And you look at some of the teams that have got off to good starts as well. Birmingham will be nowhere near 7th. Nowhere near. Nowhere near the playoffs. Absolutely miles away. Mid-table, probably be lucky to finish 15th if they continue playing the way that they did yesterday. And if we continue to play like we did yesterday, we'll certainly be in and around that top 6, 100 million %. Creating chance after chance. And I was looking the other day just to see sort of how good Birmingham's defence was. In fairness, they'd only conceded 11 goals so far this season prior to yesterday. So they are quite difficult to break down in that sort of instance. But in terms of the chances we created yesterday, it could have been 6, and we could have pretty much doubled the amount of goals conceded they had going into the game yesterday. So yeah, it's always funny to look at the league table early on in the season. Did I think that Boro would or were in any real danger in the first 7 games? From what I saw, not necessarily in danger in terms of imminent, oh my God, it's panic stations. You could sort of see signs that things were possibly going to turn eventually. Did I think that it was going to turn as quick after the Sheffield Wednesday game? No, definitely not. To win your first game against Southampton, follow that up and continue following it up and following it up and following it up. You've just played Cardiff, Sunderland, and Birmingham that have all received really a lot of plaudits from championship pages and podcasts for their starts of the season and the way that they played. And in every game, Middlesbrough bettered them. And whether that be by circumstance or whether that be just Middlesbrough being better than them, the results stay the same. Middlesbrough, 3 wins out of those games against teams that have been in the playoffs at stages this season. And yeah, we're certainly on the march now.
Yeah, we're really starting to build up a bit of momentum, and obviously we're absolutely crossing everything that can continue. And I think I mentioned it earlier on this podcast. We joked. Well, I think I made the joke after the Southampton game that this was going to be the start of the unbeaten run from now until the end of the season. And although it's probably going to come around at some point, we keep on joking and it seems to keep on continuing. So I don't really want to not joke about it in this episode, just in case, it actually does now continue. But we'll be hoping to continue some of that momentum, of course, in the 2 games that are coming up this week. Obviously, a trip to Carrow Road on Tuesday, Nathan, and then a home game against Stoke City on Saturday. We'll obviously talk about Norwich first. I mean, historically, it's always a ground where you think in the Championship, I'd be happy with a point. Up until last year, where Riley McGree just whipped out a scissor kick and we scored last kick of the game, and it sort of felt like that was the launch pad of the season almost. Obviously, with Norwich surrendering a 2-goal lead and losing 3-2 to Leeds yesterday, you kind of now look at that game and think, I mean, weirdly enough, we sort of see it. I don't know if your Twitter's the same or X or whatever you want to call it, but because of our previous sort of collaborations with Taught Norwich City and Chris Reeve, I see a lot of Norwich fans on my timeline. And at the moment, from what I understand, it seems like pressure's starting to build on David Wagner. Is it maybe a good time to play them, dare I say
it? Obviously, they'll be wanting a reaction after yesterday. That's fair to say. And to go 2-0 up in a game at home against your former manager, you're at half time. You've exploited their way of playing all first half, got yourself 2-0 up, and you think you're pretty much cruising. And from what I could sort of gauge from their fans is, in the second half, they came out a completely different side in terms of they just sat in and tried to just defend that 2-0 lead, and it backfired against them, as you probably would expect with Leeds' attacking players. You look at some of the names there, and they're probably a bit too good for the Championship. But yeah, look, to go and lose 3-2 at home after being 2-0 up is, of course, a really poor result. And they'll be looking for a reaction in front of the home fans. But if Middlesbrough go there and get that first goal, the crowd will turn. And I know it will, from what I can gather. I think that Wagner was under pressure anyway, a little bit before the season had even started, based on their end to last season. I think they won something like one of the final 10 games or something like that at the end of last season, which of course is unacceptable really, for a team of Norwich's sort of caliber in terms of their playing staff. And look, they got off to a good start this season as well. A lot better than many expected them to get off to as well. And they've had some injuries to Ashley Barnes and to Sargent as well. And it's sort of killed the momentum a little bit, in terms of Norwich and their like recent run of form. Their last win was against Birmingham, and that was a good few weeks ago now. They were beaten away at Swansea, drew away at Coventry. I mean, in fairness, they looked like they were going to win that before Ben Gibson headed one in his own goal. But yeah, they've got a few dangerous players though. Sarah is probably the star man in midfield. Earned himself a lot of plaudits last season in the Championship. A lot of Norwich fans sort of expected that he'd move on in the summer. He hasn't. He scored yesterday, and yeah, by all accounts, he's a really good player. And of course, they've got Jonathan Rowe and Onel on both sides as well. Onel's one of them players where I think on his day he could look like the best player in the league.
Yeah.
But his day doesn't come around very often, and hopefully it doesn't come around on Tuesday night. And then Jonathan Rowe, academy graduate at Norwich, and got off to a really good start this season. Off that right hand side, scored 6 goals so far this season. So, look, there are players to be wary about, but can we exploit Norwich? I think that we can.
It's Alex Neil's Stoke following Norwich. Of course, they beat Sunderland yesterday, which I'm sure Alex Neil absolutely enjoyed to the fullest extent. Stoke are a weird one, aren't they? And we're going to have the same conversation that we'll probably have if this podcast is still going on in 10 years' time and Stoke are still in the Championship, or even in, I don't know, 10 years is a long time, but maybe it's even 3 years' time. Who knows? Every single year, you look at Stoke's business and you think, this is the year. This is the year where it's going to click. They've got a good manager in charge, and they're finally just going to get that consistency over the course of the season and go all the way and get back to the Premier League. And yet, okay, yes, there's a lot of games to go, but you kind of look at their squad again this season and just think they might do what they did last season, put about, 4 or 5 wins together towards the back end of last season. They took a point off us when we were in absolute domination mode. And I thought, I'll tell you what, if they can put some more positive results together, they could possibly even gate crash the playoffs. Well, obviously they didn't do that, but they seem to just have the carbon copy of every season, really.
Yeah, I mean, last season in that game against them at the Riverside, they were probably one of the best sides that I've seen come against us last season in terms of when they came to the Riverside. And obviously they were in a really good run of form at the time. And in that run, they went to Coventry away and beat them 4-0. And you look at sort of the fall off. I think since Stoke have come back into the Championship a good few years ago now, seen this or heard it on Second Tier podcast. The highest that they finished since coming back into the Championship is something like 14th. And you look at that and you think, you what? That can't be real. But they do. They do.
Doesn't sound real.
They always finish around 14th, 15th every season because they usually start really slow. They get a little bit better and they pick up a few wins. They're never really in any danger of going down, but they're never really in any danger of going and sort of threatening the playoffs either. Last season was the first year pretty much since they've come down where I thought, oh yeah, they could really be a decent side. Them if they go into the playoffs, they could give anyone a game. Well, you look at when they went to Sunderland and just battered them 5-1 away from home, and
Yeah.
it's like, where's that even come from? And obviously the Coventry one and us that we've spoken about there, I thought they could really be a side that causes a good bit of damage in the playoffs. But yeah, I think they then played something like QPR at home. QPR hadn't won in something like 1,000 games, and they went there and won 1-0. And it just sums Stoke up, honestly. So I think yesterday obviously we have sort of We follow Scott Wilson at the Northern Echo, and obviously they cover Sunderland as well, and they were building up to the game, and they covered Alex Neil's sort of pre-match quotes as well, and they'd spoken about Stoke, and before yesterday they'd won 1 in 8, and then they'd beat Sunderland, and you just think what a weird side they are in terms
Yeah,
of like having players, and as you mentioned, the summer business. You looked at them and they made a lot of good signings. Ben Pearson's one that always stands out as a sturdy championship player. He's always decent enough to be playing at the top half of the championship. Signing Luke McAnally on loan, obviously impressed at Coventry last year, and I thought, oh, he's a good signing for them. But yeah, strange, really strange side. Currently, before the midweek games, they're sat in 20th in the league, 4 points behind Boro. Won 4 so far this season, drawn 1, lost 7. Yeah, really weird side, Stoke. We've got, uh, of course, we've got Norwich on the Tuesday. They've got Leeds at home on the Wednesday, 8 p.m. kickoff. So Borough have, I suppose it's another day recovery on Stoke, but we've got to travel back from the end of the world, East Anglia, uh, following the game on Tuesday night. So pretty much eradicates that. But yeah, it's probably going to be another really difficult test. But yeah, Norwich and Stoke. I don't think you could probably pick a more championship week of fixtures, really. And hopefully we continue this run. And I mean, it'd be incredible to come into this podcast next week off the back of another 2 wins, wouldn't it? But
yeah, it
I'm
really
not.
would.
I'm not quite sure it will. I think 4 points out of this week, I'd be over the moon.
Yeah, I think I probably, well, in fact, I completely agree with you. Look, it'll be interesting. I think some of the talking points that we've covered Josh Coburn on this podcast quite heavily, and to be honest, I wouldn't be surprised to see Lyle start on Tuesday night, and then people listening to the podcast who want to see Josh Coburn drop will probably laugh the pants off. But look, I don't think Josh Coburn and Michael Carrick will probably say the same. It's probably only fair that Latilaf's been having these impacts on games. We'll see what he's like starting a game for the first time in quite a number of weeks. That would be quite interesting to see, I guess. But yeah, I think that probably covers everything for this week, Nathan. Unless there's anything else that you sort of want to go over. Obviously, we'll wait and see how Tommy Smith is and what that means. I'd probably hazard a guess that if he does miss Tuesday, Rav Vandenberg will come in as opposed to playing with Isaiah Jones at right back from the first whistle. But yeah, another difficult weekend. I think you summed it up perfectly. Probably the most championship week you could ever imagine.
Yeah, just on Tuesday night, and if there is an issue at right back, I think he'll go with Vandenberg as well, just to get that out there. But that Dijksteel, Jones, and Crooks right side,
Yeah, it's a thing of beauty, isn't it?
it really could be that redemption arc after almost a season out. And I mean, we're starting to see signs of Jones and Crooks sort of returning to that telepathic nature that they had under Wilder. But and down that right hand side as well, it could really be the return of that wonderful trio. The only thing is, Dijksteel hasn't really had a pre-season, so I mean, as I mentioned, I think Vandenberg will fill in there.
Yeah.
But yeah, it would be nice to see Anfin there. But yeah, I think that's all really. Fly
Yeah.
high now on the march.
Yeah, that can be the title of the podcast if you like. I think you given me last week's as well. So yeah, that can be this week's title. So yeah, as always, Nathan, thank you for your time. Thank you for those that have watched and listened. as always, shameless plug. If you're watching on YouTube, do subscribe, and on audio platforms, subscribe on those as well to be notified when we upload. But from me and Nathan, that's been another episode of the Boropolis podcast, and we will be back again next week.